But thank you all so much for joining us for tonight's program. Very much looking forward to it. It is let me get this right. I'm gonna butcher the pronunciation here. The Murder of Dorothy Milliken.
Yes.
Cold case in Maine. Wonderful. And I'm going to let Sharon tell you about the story, but let me introduce Sharon, if my computer will allow me to do so. I apologize. I'm on different technology tonight. Okay, so Sharon Kitchens has lived in Maine for a few decades. Her first book, Stephen King's Maine, A History and Guide, was published by History Press back in 2024. Every week, Sharon can be seen carrying an armload of library books. She loves hanging out in cafes, eating chocolate croissants, and sipping lavender lattes. Her fondness for Patti Smith's poetry is matched only by her love of Taylor Swift's lyrics. She is both a cat and a dog person. And she sometimes writes at her Substack, which is deliciousmusings.substack.com. I'll put that link in the chat. So all 100 plus of us who are watching live and the many more that will watch the recording, let's give a big virtual round of applause to Sharon for joining us here tonight. And Sharon, you can take it away. Thanks so much.
Okay. Oh my gosh, Robert, thank you so much. So yeah, I actually was at the library earlier today because I actually have this book that I picked up there. Also, it is 85, which means we're melting here in Maine. So I have the window open just in case you hear anything loud go by. And shout out to Orono, huge fan of Orono. So I'm in Portland, Maine, and this is the book, The Murder of Dorothy Milliken, that I will be, you see that, talking about tonight. So thanks so much for tuning in. Okay, so I'm the author of Stephen King's Maine, A History and Guide, which, as Robert said, came out last year with Arcadia Publishing, otherwise known as the History Press. And for that book, what I did was I traveled around Maine to various towns that had inspired King's fictional landscape of Castle Rock and of Derry. Primarily, I was writing about Castle Rock. And as part of that, I spent a bunch of time in Lewiston, Maine. When Stephen King moved to Maine with his mother and older brother when he was 11, 12 years old, they were living in Durham, and he would go to see the Bee Monster movies in Lewiston. So I had a chapter about that in the book, and again, was spending time there. And Lewiston really got under my skin in a good way. I found it a jewel in the rough. I knew that when I finished the book or in the chapter in the book, I wanted to spend more time there. So in September, early September of 2023, yes, melting here, I had a conversation with my editor about the next project, and he suggested a few things, and one of those was to do a true crime book. And no offense to anyone who is interested in true crime, I was very limited in my knowledge at the time when I said to him, absolutely not. I would have no interest in it. At that point, I had read Truman Capote's In Cold Blood and Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil. And the latter of the two was published in the 90s. So that was about as current as I was on true crime. So and at that point, my thinking about true crime and why I was saying no is because I thought that true crime this was my impression. Again, my uneducated impression was that it was macabre. I didn't think it was ethical. I thought that, families weren't involved necessarily, that it wasn't stories about victims, it was stories about serial killers. And that just wasn't something none of that interested me. But I'm a very, very curious person. So the next morning, I got my cup of coffee and I was sitting in front of my laptop, and I went online and found that the Maine State Police have an Unsolved Homicides webpage. So I was looking on that, and within a few seconds, I had sorted. They had 70-ish cases then, they do now. very quickly, I came up to Lewiston again, because I'd wanted to spend more time in Lewiston, even though I wasn't thinking I was going to do this. In the back of my head, I was like, well, Lewiston. And then also the 1970s, I sorted by the 1970s, because the 1970s has always been a decade of interest to me as far as fashion and culture. So at that point, I landed on Dorothy Milliken. She was the only, as far as I recall, she was the only unsolved homicide in Lewiston from the 1970s. And I read the 2 or 3 sentences about her, that she had been a 27-year-old mother of 3 who had been at a laundromat in Lewiston, that she was from Sabattus, which is a neighboring town, but had been in Lewiston doing her laundry in the middle of the night and had been killed. And I immediately thought 2 things. One was, what in the actual, which was, by the way, actual was definitely not the word that I used. Was this woman doing in a laundromat in the middle of the night in this neighboring town? And second was, who was she? I just wanted to know who she was. I wanted to know her life. It's hard for me to explain the spark that happened when I saw her name, but that was what happened. So I still wasn't thinking that I was going to do a book, but I went online and I found just a handful of like articles or interviews that her daughter had done, or just reviews of the case, because it was, again, almost 50 years old. And they really kind of all said the same thing, which I'd already read on the Maine Unsolved Homicide site, but they didn't give me any more real insight into who she was. It was the same thing. She'd left her home late at night. She'd gone to the neighboring town, yada, yada, yada. So then I went on a site called newspapers.com, which some of you may know. It's a subscription archival site. And I was able to look at copies of newspapers back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and get a much fuller picture of what was going on at that time, and of a little inkling more as to who she was. Because back especially in the 60s, even, the newspaper would print, if somebody was having a neighborhood barbecue, they would print that. They would print who was attending. If you were a bridesmaid in a wedding, that was in the paper. Divorces, if you were pulled over for drunk driving, it was all there. And so the next thing I knew, so I keep these spiral bound notebooks. And the next thing I knew, I swear I had like 100 different questions about this whole situation. And at that point I thought, okay, I'm definitely interested in this, but I absolutely am sure I'm not going to do a book, was what I was thinking. So I had talked to a couple of contacts who are former law enforcement. One actually had been a homicide detective for a number of years. And they both separately said to me, you should do this book, which shocked me, but they did. They said, you should do it because you could bring attention to the case. And I would never have expected that. But when they told me that, I thought, okay, I felt that an obligation that if I could ever help someone else, this was, by the way, with zero ego, full well knowing that I have no law enforcement training, no investigative training beyond just the research and the stories that I work on. But I thought, if I could help, if the detective in charge, if the family wanted me to, then I would see what I could do. And so ultimately I did meet the detective who has had the case for the last 12 years. And he said he, again, thought, yes, it would be a good idea for me to do this, that I could bring attention to the case. The next step was meeting Tanya, Dorothy's daughter. And when I walked into the state police barracks in Gray, Maine, all I can say is that I just immediately thought Tanya was a badass, and I can pay someone no higher compliment. I am floored by her strength and her bravery, her endurance, and her overall positive mindset. The fact that she is so protective of her mother and of her family, and that she has done everything within her power to try to keep her mother's case in front of the police, in the media, it's astounding. And so when we met, Tanya laid out a number of rules, all of which I was actually very grateful for and agreed to immediately. And one of the biggest rules was that I would, and this changed as the trust, as the relationship began, but that I would not do any interviews with her family without her present. And so that actually I thought would be helpful anyway, even though she was 7 years old when her mother passed away. So when I met Tanya, that was the turning point. That was when I was really locked into this. So who was Dorothy Milliken? She was, yes, a 27-year-old mother of 3 from Sabattus, Maine. She was also someone who who loved to make people laugh. She was one of a group of very close-knit friends, of 5 close-knit girlfriends throughout school. And she was the only one of them that could change a tire. She liked ketchup on broccoli. She liked ketchup on everything. She drank coffee all day long. She collected rocks. She liked picking flowers. She loved the Beatles. She loved George Harrison. She loved Elvis Presley. She was into fashion. She started thrifting when she was older, and she was known for being very stylish. And the more I found out about her, the more I liked her, the more that I wish that I could have known her. She was 5'1" and 110 pounds soaking wet. So she was small, but she was strong. And that's important. And we'll get to that in a little bit. So let me also say that I did not have access to any of the police, the binders, any of the files from this case. And when I requested FOIAs, which are Freedom of Information Act requests, I was declined by the Attorney General's office on all fronts, including my requests for closed cases, because in the state of Maine, and I don't have the details right in front of me, but it is in the book, but in the state of Maine, I think it's something like before 1996, all files are closed to the public. So I really had to do all of my own research. Which actually I think ended up being a good thing, because it made me, I think, work that much harder and not rely on files that, you know, there could have been flaws, there could have been information missing. Okay, well, let's go to Dorothy's last day. So keep in mind that, and this is talking to homicide detectives, and also if you've ever seen any episode of Law and Order or read an Agatha Christie or any number of things, this will make sense. Every single detail of a person's last movements, of their last 24 hours, that matters. If someone normally goes to this post office, but for some reason they go to a post office in another town, it could have absolutely nothing to do with anything, or it could have absolutely everything to do with what happens. So you have to pay attention to all of that. So in addition to getting to know Dorothy, one of the first things that I set out to do was to understand exactly what she did in the days, the weeks, the months, but especially the 24 hours leading up to when she passed. And then I worked myself out from there, from places where she'd spent time. I talked to people who, everyone from someone who was a doorman at a club, to someone who was a drug dealer, to someone who had been a newspaper boy in the area at the time, to someone who was a car expert, a classic car expert, who could talk to me about Dorothy's car and what the police cars were like at that time, to getting details about vending machines for sodas in the area, which we'll get to in a second. So, okay, Dorothy got up on Friday, November 5th, 1976. Her husband, Peter, had already left for work. She was a coffee all day drinker, cold, warm, it didn't matter. So she walked her daughter, Tanya, out to the bus stop with her cup of coffee. And I think that was around 7:30 in the morning. School began around 8:15. Then at around 8:30, 9 o'clock, Dorothy took her baby, little Pete, to her sister Mary Ellen's in a neighboring town. Her other younger daughter, Gail, who I'm not Gail, sorry, Erica, stayed home with a 19-year-old woman by the name of Gail, who, if you've ever seen any of the coverage, she's only ever referred to as a 19-year-old. And I actually have a chapter on her in the book. I was able to talk to her mom. So if you pick up the book. But anyway, so Gail was someone that Dorothy used to babysit and had lived down the street. And Gail was staying there with her baby and had an arrangement with Dorothy that she would get to stay on the sofa in exchange for helping with the childcare. And mind you, the house that Dorothy was staying in living in with her husband and Gail and their children was very small, very, very small. And it was like a 2-bedroom sort of, and really one level. So anyhow, this also comes into relevance later on. So Dorothy leaves the house, Gail's there taking care of Dorothy's daughter, Erica. She takes her son over to Mary Ellen's. They have a cup of coffee again. And then this is where we're not entirely sure what happened. Sorry, it is so hot. But Dorothy went and got her hair permed in either Lewiston or Lisbon. And this is one of those things that nags me today, because most people, they go to the same hairdresser. So I've never understood how Dorothy could have gone to one place or the other. But in talking to her sisters, that's what they say. And they say she got her hair done on a regular basis, and that was totally normal. And they didn't see anything to that. At some point, she also saw 1 or 2 friends, probably briefly. She was collecting money on behalf of her sister, who they'd held like one of those at-home fashion shows. And she actually had that money on her. It was in her pocketbook, which was inside the laundromat that night. And just so you know, it amounted to what would be several $100s today, and it was still there. Okay, so she's gotten her hair done. She's done all this. Then she goes and she picks up Tanya at school and takes her to her sister's house. And again, here's a question of why did she do that? Because her sister, and again, none of this may mean anything, but I'm just pointing these things out because, again, any single thing that's different. So Tanya, again, 7 years old, had gotten had gotten on the bus by herself before from school. She'd gone to her grandparents' house. So for some reason, though, Dorothy picked her up and from school early, took her to her sister's house. More coffee was drunk. Tanya asked to stay overnight. Dorothy said fine, because Tanya was really close with her cousin. And this was the last time that Mary Ellen saw her sister. From there, Dorothy took little Pete, who was just a few months old, over to Central Maine General Hospital in Lewiston because he had an appointment. He had a small procedure scheduled for the next week. She was very upset when Peter did not show up. And from there at around 3:30, she went to what's known as the farm, which is where she'd grown up. And that's in Sabattus. And that's where her parents still lived. And so she was there. And then Peter showed up with a friend of his. They had been drinking, is what I was told. And they got into an argument. It did not get physical, Dorothy and Peter, but there were raised voices. Then at some point, Peter left with his friend, and they, I've been told, continued drinking. Meanwhile, Dorothy went home. She changed clothes, also totally normal for her to change clothes more than once in a day. She'd been running around. So she put on a pair of jeans, her beloved Dr. Scholl's, and a little white top, crop top, white top. And then she had a jacket with her. It was an unseasonably warm day that day, by the way. Like the neighbor was outside in a t-shirt or something doing yard work. And so then when Peter came home, that was at around 7:30, 8 o'clock at night. They had a couple friends come over for what Gail has described through other persons, because Gail, by the way, has not been seen or heard from in years. She left Maine and her movements were followed to a point, but anyway, so that's a whole nother story. So friends dropped by. Peter said they stayed for dinner, but according to Gail, they were only there for a few minutes. And based on who they were, Dorothy's family and friends believe probably that they were only there for a few minutes, that that's what the relationship was. Dorothy and Peter got into another argument. It was more heated than it had even been at the farm that afternoon. Things were said, and threats were made by Peter, and according to Gail, and then they made up, and then according to Peter, he went to bed and had no idea that Dorothy had left the house or that she'd gone to the laundromat. Dorothy left. She put several bundles of laundry in her car, which had been seen. So we do know that there were bundles of laundry at the house. It was sort of like a outhouse, not really outhouse, but kind of a shed area attached to the house. And that's where they'd been. And so that was around 10:30, 10:45 at the very latest that she had done that. And then she got in her car and she drove the 10 minutes or so that it took to get to her parents. This is a key thing. She was a night owl, and she did stay up late at her home cleaning. She did not normally go to the laundromat that late at night. I don't even know that she went to the laundromat really like late night at all. When she did go to the laundromat, it was more often with her mom or with her older sister, Mary Ellen. So I know that in the press, and I maybe on the Maine State Unsolved Homicides webpage, it says that that was normal for her, but it was not normal for her. It was normal, again, for her to stay up at night and for her to clean inside her home. But I think, so one of the things is when she went to her parents' house and she asked if her mom could accompany her, that right there told me that, and also other investigating that I did do, that she was almost definitely not having an affair. I found no evidence whatsoever to suggest that. And I did look deeply. But her mother was not feeling well, and so she didn't go. And so then her dad, she asked supposedly, and he said that he didn't want to go. He wanted to stay home with his wife, something that he regretted, and which ultimately, of course, broke him after Dorothy was killed. So Dorothy is unafraid to go ahead and apparently thought she was safe to go alone that late at night to the laundromat. I have talked to other people who have lived in Lewiston at around that time and in years later, and they said that they would have done the exact same thing. They would have gone to the laundromat alone at night. It was located at least a mile from the downtown bars and places, so it wasn't, which was very seedy. At the time, there were sex workers wandering, there were people who were drunk in the street. It was a little bit mayhem down there, but she was at least a mile or more from that. I haven't measured it, but where the laundromat was it was sandwiched between two three-story apartment buildings, and it was in front of a house and in front of really a residential neighborhood. There was a supermarket down the street. Kitty corner was an auto repair shop, or like a service station, really is more accurate. So there was a underground type bar, which was not uncommon in the area, that was in a home nearby. But it was pretty quiet. The laundromat was very well lit, however, especially in the front. So Dorothy leaves the farm. She drives back not lit roads, 2-lane roads, and she arrives at the laundromat at around 11:45. And again, I think the police and newspaper reports had estimated her arriving there earlier at around 11. But based on interviews with the family, I believe, and they believe, it was 11:45. It could even have been as late as midnight. It was a 24-hour laundromat, coin operated. There was no attendant at night. And that was known. So she would have known that she was going to this place and probably would have been the only person there. It is believed by family, and based on everything that I have heard from family and friends, I believe as well that she went to the laundromat because she needed a quiet place alone to think. She was very, very stressed out about everything from what was going on with her baby, to bills that they had, to her relationship with Peter. And again, she just needed quiet. She needed a place to just to think. So she's there, she's doing her laundry. She had finished the washing. She had mostly finished the drying, and she was in the process of folding the clothes. And that is when she went outside, either because she saw someone she knew, or it was a stranger, or because she was chased outside because someone had come in. And she was killed in the parking lot. And her time of death was estimated as early morning. She around 3 a.m. is what I think, the 2:30, I think probably it was closer to 3, but the medical examiner just said the early morning hours. A young man who was dropping off newspapers on the sidewalk in front of the laundromat saw what he probably thought was a sleeping bag or something, went to check on it, and that was when Dorothy's body was discovered at 4:45 a.m. And that was her final day. So the investigation. So the original detectives, the Maine State Police, so the Lewiston Police took charge of the scene within an hour or hour and a half. And then the Maine State Police arrived shortly thereafter. And something to just, and I apologize, I'm hopping around a little bit here, but something to keep in mind is that while it had been really warm, unseasonably warm the day before, the temperatures had plummeted. It was freezing by the time that she would have gone outside in her little top. She left her pocketbook inside the laundromat, and she also left her jacket inside the laundromat. And there's no heating vents or anything like that where she would have been standing outside in warm air. So when she went outside, it was, again, she was either running from someone, or she only expected to be outside for a very, very short period of time. At that point, you could smoke inside the laundromat, which she had been smoking. So that was not why she went outside. So the investigation. So when a case goes cold, what I was told by law enforcement is there are a couple of reasons. But the number one biggest reason is tunnel vision. That a detective gets into his or her mind an idea of who did it, of what happened, and they don't look anywhere in the peripheral, up or down. And that is absolutely what happened with Dorothy's case. And I say that because I spoke with a detective who was on that scene from the Maine State Police. And when I interviewed him once, he would talk to me again after that. But when I talked to him, he told me exactly who he thought had done it. And he had thought that that person had done it from the very beginning. And he challenged me or anyone else to think otherwise. And that was it. And the second reason that police have told me that cases go cold is because of arrogance. And that it's because, and, obviously, I mean, these are specific cases. There are many, many law enforcement who they would, do a thorough job, not make assumptions. There would be no arrogance. So this is just what happens in some cases, primary reasons why they go cold. And it is what happened with Dorothy's investigation, where I will say that it's my finding that literally almost every single thing that could go wrong with an investigation went wrong with her investigation. So what happens when a detective is arrogant is, for example, the Maine State Police and the Lewiston Police had a very poor relationship. The Lewiston Police felt, as did some other local departments, that the Maine State Police bigfooted, because Maine State Police had they had a priority with homicides. So in the state of Maine, the Maine State Police have jurisdiction, with the exception of Bangor and of Portland, for all homicides. So it could have been that even if the Lewiston Police found some evidence, it's possible that the Maine State Police detectives were, willing to not listen to that, let's just say, in theory. But what happened is, by the time the Maine State Police had arrived, there had been the scene had been completely contaminated. So Lewiston Police were not trained at that point with scene control. They weren't used to dealing with stranger homicides. That was something that had started in the 70s. It was very rare. What happened with Dorothy, and there was another homicide that was similar in town that weekend, which I'll get to in just a minute, was very, very, very rare. DNA, 3 letters in the alphabet, that had years to come. So there were certain things that they couldn't have known about, but there were other things like letting the press onto the scene, letting them walk around in the parking lot. Higher ups from downtown were walking on the scene. So it was a mess. And that I've been told by someone who was with the Maine State Police who was on the scene. And I've also been told by other police who are aware through other police about what happened on the scene. Additionally, the only place that was treated as a crime scene, which means the only place that they collected any evidence, was the parking lot. They did not consider the interior of the laundromat, I've been told, as a crime scene, nor did they consider her car as a crime scene. So just something else. According to Tanya, when Dorothy went to the laundromat, they always parked on the side. She parked on the front, in the front here, which could have just been because she'd gone there very late at night and that was well lit. So I don't really take much to that. But they did not treat the inside of the laundromat as a crime scene. And I think that was a huge, huge error. And keep in mind that obviously real life is not like CSI, and there is only so much that any team can cover. But I absolutely believe that crucial evidence was bypassed because they did not consider the interior as a crime scene. So that was sort of where things started. Now, okay, let's move over to the other homicide and what then proceeds to happen. So there was a man by the name of Robert Shorty McBride. He was from Springville, Maine. And he was, and I apologize, he was at least in his 60s. He might have been older. He was a guy that was staying over at the Lewiston Fairgrounds, which was where there was a racetrack there. There were a couple mobile home parks. He slept on a cot inside a barn. He was very friendly with the owner of this horse barn and with the owner's family. Shorty got the nickname because he was 4'9" or 5 feet, but well-liked, jovial guy. He was an alcoholic. It was normal for him that when he would get his paycheck or any check, that he would go out drinking, flash his money around. He had been, quote, rolled by more than once, which means he'd been robbed, but no one had ever and beaten him up. I mean, he was harmless, even if he was stone cold sober, but especially if he was drunk. So he was found passed out. Well, he was presumably passed out according to the alcohol content level that the medical examiner found in his cot. I don't know if he was face down, but he had been killed, beaten with a 2x4 that was found outside the barn. And he had been robbed for, I think off the top of my head, it was for around $70. And so he was found sometime around probably 7:30 a.m. at the latest. And the Maine State Police and the Lewiston Police were on site there within a few hours. I'm not sure. The Maine State Police spent several hours at Dorothy's crime scene, so I'm not entirely sure when they went over, but Lewiston Police were on the scene there earlier. So then what happens is the Maine State Police, and by the Maine State Police, I mean, it could have been higher ups, it could be the detectives on the scene. There was a decision that Dorothy's case was an open and shut case. At that time, they believed, and I am in no way, shape, form, anything saying that he did it. Absolutely not. But they decided that they thought it was the husband. And so that was what they decided. Again, in no way, shape, or form am I saying that Peter's remotely responsible for what happened, but that was what they decided. It was open and shut. They were going to get him. So let's go to this other crime scene, which is a real whodunit. Well, it turns out that they could not have been more wrong. It turns out that a couple of young men had given Daniel Farrington and Scott Snow, they were 1920 maybe, 2021. They had given Shorty a ride to some place where he could cash his check. And then they were, through various police interviews, because it was really easy to track his movements. People knew Shorty. One of the Lewiston police that arrived at the barn knew Shorty. They knew what he was like, that he went out, that he showed his money. So they were able to track down these two young men pretty quickly. They said Farrington's family was able to get him a deal. Snow did not have a family that could support him in that way. And Farrington ultimately ended pointing the finger and turning over testimony, which is what the court relied on. I'm oversimplifying this, but I'll give you a couple of important details in a second. But basically, in 1977, Snow was convicted for Shorty McBride's death, and he was given life sentence, which was later drastically reduced. And again, this was all on Farrington's testimony. It's my understanding that there was nothing else that could actually tie him to that scene. And basically what had happened is that Snow and Farrington had been out, they'd been doing drugs, they'd been drinking, and that again, Snow wanted some money. Neither of these young men had any violent run-ins with the police. There had been a couple trespassing type charges on Snow's. Farrington had like drinking and driving, excessive noise complaints, stuff like that. Snow was blacked out drunk that night, that morning. That's what he told family, that's what he told anyone and everyone. And based on my research, I have no reason to doubt that. So Farrington, according to Farrington, it was Snow who wanted to go and wanted to get this money. And so again, the way that Robert Shorty McBride was killed was he was beaten up with this 2x4, which was left at the scene. And to have two murders like this in one weekend was literally enough that I talked to one person who had a knife under their bed. They were so scared, under their pillow, and someone else who sent their wife and young son out of town. It was that rare. And so these two murders took place both at around the same time. When I talked to people at one of the places where Snow and Farrington had hung out, it was a doorman at this one club. He was one of the owners. And according to him, the police never came to that club. And he said he would have absolutely known because, you know, like they would have known because he was one of the owners, and they, you know, and so it's possible that the police didn't even like really look at where Snow and Barrington had checked, you know, where they had been that night. And so when they would have left this one club where I'd interviewed the doorman, they had then to drive through town, and they were taking a friend home out of town. They would have passed the laundromat, and they would have passed the fairgrounds. And I asked more than a couple of different people about what route they probably would have taken. And again, I'm not saying that they're guilty in any way, shape, or form either. I'm just trying to put together a full picture of, you know, what was going on that night. And so, but they would have almost definitely driven by the laundromat and seen it lit up. And then they, again, went by the fairgrounds, went out of town, came back into town. We know they went to the fairgrounds because Robert Shorter McBride was killed by Snow. And then it's a question mark of, could they have gone to the laundromat because Snow knew that he had blood on his hands? That's in court testimony that I was able to find, to go and wash it off. Did something happen from there? If Dorothy was confronted by someone, it doesn't matter who they were. It doesn't matter how big they were. She wasn't the kind of person that was going to back down. But again, maybe they never even went there. So it's just one more possibility. But what is interesting about all of that, and I should also say, I never found any sort of inkling of any kind of a conspiracy anywhere remotely near any of this. I think it was just poor choices, police being overwhelmed. It was just really, really bad luck for this investigation. But what happened, and I stress no conspiracy, but literally what happened was just within a few hours in 1976, with no video cameras, no way to track, no DNA, nothing like that. There was someone, I believe it was from the Attorney General or the District Attorney's Office, who was the spokesperson who was talking to the press and said, there is no connection between these two cases. And there's absolutely no way they could possibly have done that. There's no way, absolutely no way they could be sure. But the reason that they were saying that is because Robert Shorty McBride had been robbed and Dorothy had not. And they hadn't even polygraphed. They hadn't even arrested or taken in or talked to Snow at that point. So that was what they were basically going off of, is my understanding, again, from people that I've talked to and from assumptions that I have then made from the research. So the other thing to keep in mind, so that whole connection is a big part of the book and a big part of what was not part of the police investigation. And that is something that I do spend time on in the book, and so the other thing that I bring into light, or if however you want to describe it and include in the book, is that there was a young police officer, Lewiston police officer, who was working on his car at the service station, Healy service station, which was across and kitty corner. And at that time, you could see from two of the bays at Healy's over to the laundromat. There was a Healy, and I want to say his name was Bill Healy, but he was a bit of a legend in Lewiston, supposed to be a really good guy. He coached, was involved with some different youth sports leagues, and just really respected. His family still is. And he happened to be friendly with a number of Lewiston police officers and allowed some of them to work on their cars there after hours. So it wasn't unusual that this gentleman, Ken Gilman, was working on his car there. But what is questionable, I think, is that he was working on his car there, and he would have left the garage after the point where Dorothy presumably would have been killed, or at around that time. And he has said he didn't see anything, but keep in mind that just 3.5, 4 years earlier, he had been the last person to see a young woman who he had been dating, possibly engaged, to see her before she was killed. And so that was, and I talked to Linton Abbott with the Maine State Police, former Maine State Police, who was a legend in the police. And he had actually been the one to clear Gilman for the first murder. And Linton was just a treasure to Tanya and I. He really was able to inform us so much about the people who were working, the detectives, about how investigations were run. I did talk to other former Maine State Police, but he was really incredible. I also, by the way, interviewed the former medical examiner and people at the Maine State Crime Lab, just to get a better idea of what forensics, how that would have worked, how the medical examiner would have worked. And if you do read the book, by the way, I really wish that I could have known Dr. Henry Ryan, who was the medical examiner for in the 70s and 80s. And he was supposed to be an absolute professional and just quite a character. He smoked a cigar or a pipe on crime scenes, during during autopsies, and he quoted Shakespeare. So just, I guess, a couple of things to think about. I was saying earlier that DNA was not known about at that time. So one of the things to keep in mind is that when evidence was collected, they weren't necessarily wearing gloves. So it is, I believe, as of the 90s, there's a comment by someone from law enforcement that there is no usable DNA from or forensics from Dorothy's case. And I think that is for a variety of reasons, but without getting too far deep into that, again, research that I did, there is nothing of forensics that can be used for Dorothy's case at this point. So for her case to be solved, it is absolutely reliant on people coming forward who have information. And that is what we're hoping will happen. I know that people have been contacting Tanya and the Maine State Police. So challenges again. So for the investigation, there's loss of evidence, loss of witnesses, loss of the crime scene, but time can be advantageous for the police. And certainly it was for me, because I talked to over 4 dozen people. Now, some of those people were experts who had nothing to do with the case, but I talked to people who had not been willing to talk to anyone before. I did inform the Maine State Police of any remotely relevant information, and anyone that I felt could benefit the state police. I did strongly encourage them to talk to the state police. One of the primary ways outside of DNA that cold cases are solved is by relationships change. So people get divorced, people move away, people just, they're not friends anymore, they're not lovers anymore. People get older, people pass away. So maybe, someone that they were afraid to talk about before, they're not afraid to talk then. So there were really so many people that were absolutely incredible that would talk to me and who would even put me in touch with other people. One of the unfortunate things that I found out is that the state police, the detective who has had the case for the past 12 years, had not spoken to a single person that I spoke to from the family, of her friends, of people that had known her outside of that. He's never spoken to her husband from Peter, who I did. I spoke with him, I met with him, had a number of conversations. And when I pressed the Maine State Police about why there was no interviewing going on, I was told it was because they don't re-interview people. And when I pushed on that, they then told me that they had no comment. So I don't know really what to make of that. My impression is that they are not and have not worked her case in a very long time. So that was really disappointing. So ethical decisions. Again, so I tried to respect any and all of the boundaries that Tanya initially set down. She had access to the files. They'd made an exception for her back in the 90s. And Tanya and I agreed that I would not ask her any questions about about what she saw, and she would not say anything to me. And again, I really do think this actually benefited the research that I found, because it made me dig that much deeper. I also decided I would absolutely not feel comfortable talking to anyone who was mentally, potentially incapacitated, even if they would have told me, revealed things. I just didn't feel that that was ethical. So I want to just also give one more little tidbit that Tanya, I always tell this to people, but this is like kind of what I think is involved in these kinds of citizen investigations, cold cases, whatever they would be, is I'm a big fan of Michael Connolly. I don't know if anyone else is out there, but I'm a huge Harry Bosch fan, and Everybody Counts or No One Counts, and Knock on Doors. And I just always loved that knock on doors bit, which anyway, for people who watch Harry Bosch or read the books, they'll know what that means. But I just like leaving no stone unturned. And so when I had spoken to the detective who'd been on the scene, and I just think this is, I don't know, interesting. But again, Tanya would just be rolling her eyes if she was here right now. Like, I can't believe you're bringing this up again. But when I spoke to the detective who'd been on the scene back in '76, and he told me a number of things about it. And one of the things that he mentioned that I just happened to write down was that she had been drinking a Pepsi, and that she had been smoking cigarettes. And I mentioned the brand. And so I later asked her sisters if, what kind of cigarettes she smoked. And it turns out that only one of her sisters knew that she smoked this brand. And so at first I thought, oh my gosh, we're onto something. She's smoking these cigarettes she doesn't normally buy. But no, that wasn't something, but the Pepsi can. So I now don't know if it was a Pepsi can or if it was a Coca-Cola can. And what at the time, this is just something, the kind of things to consider when you're working a cold case. So something that took place, 2 or 3 decades ago or more, is so Dorothy did not keep soda at home, and her parents didn't keep soda. And I don't know about you, but when I go to people's houses, like I know what seltzer water they have. I know whatever. I know to some degree what they drink. And so her parents didn't have the Pepsi or any kind of soda, and she didn't at home. She didn't stock it. So, and there wasn't a vending machine at the laundromat, but there was a vending machine at the service station across the street, and it was inside, and it did have Coca-Cola, not Pepsi. And I still wonder about that darn can and where that came from. And if she had stopped somewhere, and if maybe the reason that things were taking longer at the laundromat, why she wasn't, out of there in 2 hours, and why she might have still been there at 3, was that because she took the time to walk across the street and to get a soda and to have a conversation with the young man who might have had absolutely nothing to do with anything? Who knows? But that's just one more piece of it. And I also want to say it was just profound what I learned from so many amazing people who are former law enforcement, and also just reading profiler books and everything. It was fascinating. But people lie all the time when it comes to investigations, and it may have absolutely nothing to do remotely with the case. So I just also found that interesting. So anyway, what I hope people take away is that they get to know Dorothy better, and that people advocate for victims, and Yeah, and I think I talked way over my allotted time, so apologies. But I'm going to stop talking now. Well, I'll do
Sharon,
Q&A.
you
So
did a great
sorry.
job, Sharon. Folks, let's give Sharon a big virtual round of applause for a great talk, and we'll take some questions. If you have questions for Sharon, please type them into the Q&A box. So Teresa says, and she asked this a little earlier on. I'm not sure if you tackled these or not. I don't think so. Teresa asks, did her husband ever remarry? Who took care of the children after her passing? And is there a reason why Gail left the area and no one can locate her?
Okay. I did not cover this, and I'm happy to do that. Yes, Peter remarried. I don't remember how long after he remarried. He did have an affair with one of Dorothy's friends pretty close to after she was killed. Again, that doesn't necessarily mean anything, but he had also had an affair while they were married. And yes, so he he got remarried, and he's been married to that woman for decades. And Gail, yes, that is interesting. So Gail, by all accounts, fled the area within a couple of days. And then she went back and forth. Because she was being interviewed by the police, she went back and forth between, and I do lay this out in the book, the whole 9 yards of where she went, but just, she basically left the state, went to Massachusetts, I think, came back. She went to live in Florida. She took chances in life. She had a problem with drugs, maybe with alcohol. So she got into a few things, and I think that unfortunately probably that led to something. And she has not been seen or heard from since the mid-90s, since the mid to late 90s.
Ralph says shoddy police work, arrogance is a terrible thing. And then he also adds, I respect the daughter's privacy, but her mom was murdered. So we need to find the killer, need to break some eggs when making an omelet.
Yeah, Tanya would agree. I mean, yeah.
By the way, Teresa did a 3-part question. Her other question was, who took care of the children after her passing?
I'm so sorry. Yes. Yes. So actually, Peter took the children up to Aroostook County, Presque Isle, which is where his brother lived, who he was doing work with. The woman he was having the affair with went with them, and that lasted a little less than a year. And then Dorothy's sisters came up and took the children back with them and raised the children between them.
Teresa, at the beginning of the talk, you had mentioned newspapers.com, and Teresa just wanted to note that she's a big fan and uses it frequently in her genealogy research.
Yeah. Oh, it's so awesome. Yeah, it's really cool.
An anonymous attendee, how were you able to find so many people still available after so many years? They must have been old.
They were, and I'm a dog with a bone. I literally I will talk to a telephone pole. I just started knocking on doors, and it was actually really interesting. I wasn't even intentionally looking for some people. The first thing I did was that I put the word out to people that I knew who had grown up in the area and who were around at that time. And I let them know what I was working on. And if they knew anybody who was around the area and could describe it, to me, I thought, well, let's start there. And then it was just a matter of, as I started needing to know different things, like, for instance, I found people who had worked at and were related to people that owned the service station randomly, because I was looking for photographs of the area and found someone who collected them, who knew this person. And then it becomes like that. Like you talk to so many people. You just start talking. You ask, my mind is like you just ask a lot of questions. And there's no manual, really. It's just, that's just the curiosity drives you.
We're going to start to wind things down. Dana asks, does the family have a theory on who did the crime?
I think they do, but who knows? I mean, the police are the ones that have, the most, they have the evidence. They're the only ones that I think confidently could put anything forward.
Now, Sharon, within the true crime space, there's a whole subgenre of podcasts, true crime podcasts. I saw that this was just covered by the Murder She Told true
Yes.
crime podcast.
Yeah.
I think you were involved. I think they used your book as their primary source. Can you talk about true crime podcasts and anything else you've been doing to get the word out about the case?
Yeah, sure. Well, I've been doing different book signings around Maine. There was a big article in the Lewiston Sun Journal. So that was great. Tanya did some TV. She's really good at TV. And yeah, so Kristen is actually a friend of mine who is the host of Murder She Told. And we are talking about doing maybe a 3-part podcast series based on the book with new evidence that I have since found since the book, which I won't talk about here, but and also being able to maybe get Lyndon on to talk directly to people. So we're hoping to do that more in the fall, completely with Tanya's support and blessing. We probably, have her on. So hoping that comes together. But Kristen was amazing with doing the 2 episodes on that. And Kristen was someone that I really leaned on some as well. We had a lot of conversations around empathy and how to and ethical storytelling. So yeah, can't say enough good things about her and her podcast.
Good. We actually just had an author on whose book was covered by that podcast as well. This was just 2 weeks ago. E.C. Hansen wrote a book called Dead End Road, which is about Renee Freer, and that was a cold case out of Connecticut.
Okay.
8-year-old girl. Yeah. I don't know. All of a sudden, all these true crime books. So it's definitely a popular genre. 2 more questions. April asks 2 more questions, then I'll have a question. April asks, how long did it take you to research the book?
Yeah. So I actively started. So it was really February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September. I worked on it about 8 months, several hours a day. And then at that point, I could have continued working on it, but Tanya and I agreed. We felt like we wanted the book to come out because we wanted to try to motivate leads because people were getting older because of all that. And we felt like I'd been pretty thorough. So, because I say this because I know that people can work on these things for years. But I just don't know what more I would have found. It's only because the book has come out and because of the press, that is why we've gotten more information. So
Deb asks, do you think there'll ever be another true crime investigation? I'm sorry. No, I misunderstood this. And maybe this segues into the next question I was going to ask. But Deb asks, do you think you'll ever do another true crime book? Investigate another true crime story? No.
I won't. I want to do the podcast series, a mini podcast series about Dorothy, but I don't think that I will. And I have been approached by 2 different families, but it is, I want so badly for the police to do this, or to find someone who is, maybe former Maine State Police who would volunteer their time. But I think with Dorothy, just to be perfectly honest, I think if I did a good job at all, and to be clear, I never set out with the intention of thinking I would remotely find out who did this, but I think I had as much, if you want to say, success with finding information because of the family. And I feel very, very loyal to them. It's a huge emotional investment. I don't think I'm equipped to do more. I'm figuring that out. If that's what you hear, it's because I'm still figuring that out. Yeah.
All right, so we're not doing another true crime book, but we are doing a multi-part podcast on this book. But
Yes.
that leads me to
Yeah.
my next question. What is next for you, Sharon? What are you working on next?
Yes. So I'm going back to my happy place, which is Stephen King. So I am actually working on a book where I am interviewing female constant readers. So women who have been reading, who've read a lot of Stephen King, um, some for decades, some for a few years, but mostly for decades, and on Stephen King's female characters. So I'm looking at that mirror, that how he's writing women and how women are reading those characters, and especially women who have experienced trauma in their lives. So a lot of the subject matter that he's writing about. And so I'm actively looking for women who are readers of Stephen King to interview for that book. And that book is going to take a few years. So yeah.
As an aside, Sharon, I am a big Bosch fan. I've read all the books and I do watch the TV show and I watch the Bosch Legacy spinoff. And I'm looking forward to the Ballard
Ballard.
spinoff. I think that starts next week, actually.
It does. I'm so excited. Oh my God.
And
Maggie
they're
Q,
releasing
right?
they're
Oh,
releasing all 10 episodes at once. They're not making us wait every week, so that's good.
yes.
So Sharon, my last question.
Did you read the
What was that?
Catalina Island detective one yet?
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
Okay. Yeah.
I've read every.
Okay.
I mean, in fact, I even like the Lincoln Lawyer even
Oh,
more than
yeah, of
Bosch.
course. Yeah.
I've read every Connolly book. My
Yeah.
question, Sharon, last question is, where can people learn more about you and your works?
Yeah, so probably the best thing is, yeah, the Delicious Musings Substack, but also SharonKitchensMaine.com. So, which has a link to the Substack, and it has information on where I'm doing talks and on the books and all of that. Yeah.
Great. Yeah. Well,
So
folks, let's give Sharon a big virtual round of applause for a great talk. Look for an email from me in about 45 minutes with a link to this recording and information about some other upcoming virtual programs that might be of interest. I'll also include links to Sharon's website and her Substack. And, this book is available wherever books are sold. Highly, and if you don't want to buy it, I encourage you to buy it. But if you don't want to buy it, I'm sure request it from your library.
libraries.
There you go. Absolutely. And for those who are watching live, please take 60 seconds and fill out the feedback survey when you exit. So thank you all so much. And I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their night. Thanks again, Sharon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.